This is probably one of my favorite shifts I've ever played in Space Station 14 in my 2 years of playing it. I'm a salvage specialist aboard Barratry Station. First 20 minutes of the shift are pretty uneventful. Just me and the other salvagers getting gear, flying our shuttles around. Salvaging right away on Barratry takes some extra time because the salvage shuttle does not have a remote shuttle console, so it takes some time to get the ship, and this will come into play later. We finally take our first expedition, which is a lava planet, and tragedy strikes instantly. The moment we step off the ship, one of my coworkers, unfortunately, steps in a hole and falls to his death, killing him permanently. I shed a few tears, I said my goodbyes, and then I met up with the other salvage tech. I figured there was still a job to do. We loot the building, we don't really get anything of major noteworthiness, and I take some damage that I need to go fix. So we go back to the station, mission complete-ish. We mourn the lost one again, and reboard the cargo part of the station. Upon exiting the salvage shuttle, arriving into cargo, immediately realize that there's something very, very wrong. There are several security officers running in the cargo, and then I end up noticing the Hop and the head of security all running around, seemingly running around mine shields. And yep, immediately the Hop mine shields me. Well, he roleplayed it a little bit saying, "Stand still for this, please," and I said, "What is it? Mine shield." Anyways, I get mine shielded, pretty much confirming to me that there are revolutionaries. People normally don't really want to spend money on them, at least unless they're at least somewhat short. And all the security members, again, double reassured me that, yes, there is an active revolution, and I am now immune to it. So, I was going to go head to medical, but then I noticed the head of security said that medical is lost. So what we did was we ended up ordering basic medical supplies on cargo shuttle. Thank God we still had cargo. And I basically helped patch up the HOS. They helped patch me up a little bit. And once everyone around was healthy and prepared and ready, there was guns being loaded, people putting on body armor, and they were saying they were going to retake the bridge. I figured I would be better off doing my job as a salvager. I was going to go look for medical supplies, materials, just things to sell. Getting money otherwise would have been pretty much impossible. So I figured the best thing I could possibly do was try to go make money. And since I was playing on Leviathan, Leviathan has random generated wrecks and asteroids out in the space field, and I just figured I'd go loot some wreckages because they can often have really good materials and even sometimes have medical supplies. I fly over to the first blue wreckage that I could see and notice that there was some shark minnows, and there was no way in hell I was going to be able to fight them with just my knife. I only had a knife and a crusher, and minnows are basically mini bosses, so I had no quarrel with them. I rammed the wreckage into another wreckage, which ended up throwing the space minnows off into space, meaning I was safe. I loot them and thankfully find some medical supplies and building materials, which I really never end up getting to use because on my way back to cargo, a few minutes later after I was done looting, I noticed on the radio that there's people talking on the radio that were not cargo technicians, salvagers, quartermasters, or whatnot, or heads. And I figured that was probably a sign that our counterattack, so to speak, failed. I finally brave up and get close enough to the docking bay of the cargo to look through the window, and I see the Hop with multiple guns in his hands, and he was begging for me to let him on. I let him on. And noticed that there was literally revolutionaries behind him, which was crazy that he got away from that. Here's the problem, though. The salvage ship does not have any atmosphere. And in the panic, I didn't have any real way of helping him at the moment, and he had no EVA. The PAI was telling me to do one thing, and the PI has been pretty helpful up until this point. I panicked, and I thought that, okay, I see the cargo shuttle on the pilot map. The best thing I could do is bring in the cargo shuttle, because the cargo shuttle I know is still pressurized. What I could have done here was I could have dragged him into a tiny fan first and medically treated him there. I had enough medical supplies on the ship to heal him, but I didn't, at the time, think about doing that. I just thought about getting to a permanent solution, which is a cargo shuttle. But so yeah, that ended up being what happened. On the cargo shuttle, I patched him up as good as I could, and thankfully, well, we were both breathing normal air. We are worried about how well the cargo ship can be controlled remotely, and sure enough, a minute or two passed by, and the cargo shuttle is hijacked from the station side and started being flown back to the station rapidly. I panicked. I figured since I'm mind shielded and that the hop was on the shuttle, that our chances of survival are pretty much nil. The only weapons we had were non-lethal weapons. Well, I think the hop actually had a lethal, but I only had a non-lethal enforcer, which happened to be on the shuttle, and my knife. And I figured the whole station was full of maniacs armed with weapons. I mean, I saw one of them with a rifle at one point, and I panicked and disabled the power on the shuttle, leaving us completely stranded in space. We talk for a bit and eventually come to the conclusion that, well, there's no point just hiding out here. The hop had a job to do, and I didn't really want to fight against the revolution or help it, because, I mean, that just really wasn't my job. And I convinced the hop that we should go back. However, before we really get to do any of that, people hijacked the salvage ship at some point during this, and they flew over. The hop hides in a crate on the shuttle, and an engineer shows up on the door and with a gun in hand, asking me. I begged for my life, telling him that I'm not a head, I'm just a salvager, I'm just out here, I'm not a revolutionary. The head of security, as it turns out, was actually hiding in space during the shift as well, not just a hop. And they asked me, where's the head of security? And I said, I don't know, there's no heads here. It was a hell of a bluff, but thankfully some random gunshots end up going off on the salvage shuttle, and the engineer leaves to check that. I run up to the hop and tell him to stay in the chest as long as possible, because they're obviously here to kill him. And two people aboard the shuttle this time, they start trying to disable me for some reason. I just beg for them to saying that I'm not a command, I'm not a head, I'm just a salvage specialist. The hop then takes this opportunity to jump out of the crate, and they decided to disable the person with non-lethal rounds, and I figured, okay, well, fuck. They're going to kill the hop, they're going to kill me now. I had no choice. I started stabbing them to death. And I managed to cut them down while the second person then pulled out a lethal shotgun and unloaded into the hop. They crit him. I managed to put 2 beanbags into him myself to disable him, and during that time, I also cut them down with a knife. Eventually, the only person left standing from that fight was me. All 3 of them died. I failed to protect the hop, but I did manage to stay alive, which is my priority. I decide that the best thing I could do gameplay wise and further to being like, you know, a respectful player here, I flew all 3 bodies back to evac, even though that put me at pretty great risk. Obviously, if any revolutionary saw me dragging dead revs and the hop off of a ship, I would be screwed. Also, again, I was mind shielded, so I couldn't be converted. But I figured it was just better for gameplay for me to fly them back to evac. I drop off all the bodies, and I start flying away and told them I left the bodies. And immediately I am questioned who's on the cargo shuttle. There's no point in lying about it. I'm not going to be able to get away with it. I said that I'm on the shuttle. I'm not a rev. I'm not against the revolution. I'm not joining it. And somebody eventually, again, flew me back to the station. I decided that I'm not going to cut the power this time. I'm just going to let whatever happens, happens. I get boarded by several revolutionaries. They all have guns out. I figured I was just going to get shot, but they didn't shoot me on the spot, which I was quite surprised. And a head rev tries to convert me. Obviously, it doesn't work, so they think it's because of my goggles I'm wearing, the welding goggles, but that was not the case either. So I just explained to them, I'm mind shielded. You can't convert me, but I'm not a problem to the revolution. I have no interest in it. And to my great surprise, this is low roleplay, by the way, this is on Leviathan, they actually let me live. Even though I was on a shuttle full of blood, tons of ammo and guns, suspiciously mind shielded on a cargo shuttle, which they could have used to buy more stuff, they actually just let me go. I was even going to give them the crate of weapons, but they closed the doors and left before I even had a chance. Basically, my life spared. I flew away into space. I basically just sat in space chatting with my PEI about how fast everything went to shit. We basically just talked and just kind of drifted away from the station completely alone. Yeah, this is a really awesome shift with a lot of really interesting RP, even though the game fully demands and wants shooting on sight. This is one of the rare scenarios where people actually were willing to talk about, like, not being converted, even though there was zero reason for them to not mechanically kill me. There's nothing that like was preventing it, but just having that RP of me bringing the bodies back, and then which I didn't have to do, and then having the RP of them not killing me, which they also didn't have to do, was really awesome. I mean, all I really got. So thank you for watching.